Hello everyone, this was Syag and I am going to be showing you today how I put together the BoldPort, the Gent. So I'm showing you here a pad that we had to do a little bit of fix on because there were some problems with. You'll see in the instructions there. And I needed to take a piece of the Kapton tape and cut a hole in it so that the solder could flow through, but then mask out the rest of the area there where the silk screening didn't cover up the areas that it needed to. Again, this is explained in the instructions there. So you can see I was using a leather hole punch to create that hole and then get the thing stuck on there where it needed to be, so that the traces that needed to be covered up by the silk screen were now covered up by the Kapton tape there. So I did a little more than was necessary, but hey, it's better to be safe than sorry. So here I have the thing mounted up in my solder vise, and we'll start attaching the little coin cell holder to it. Using a clamp to kind of hold it in place. Probably have to get it pretty hot. And once it's in place, we'll get it all soldered up. All right, so that looks pretty good. And off camera, I did go and use a meter to actually verify the problem that it existed without that repair was that the positive and the negative was shorted together. So I verified that they weren't. So that was an example of the little feet that get made with the resistor pairs here. So I'll show you how I put those together. I just tacked them together with a little bit of solder, and then bent the wires to form the toes of the feet. And then once I had those formed up, I just attached a little dab of solder at the tips of the toes to kind of give them a little bit of, kind of rounded, bulby type look to them. So, and then bent the foot out. So there you can see that. And then I did that 3 more times with the remaining resistors. So then next was to solder in the LEDs, and of course those are, it matters the polarity, so I wanted to make sure I had the polarity right on all of them. And I also wanted to make sure when I turn this on, you'll see the colors there. There's red, green, 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 red. Well, it's supposed to go green, red, green, red, green. So I needed to switch those outer two around and get those put straight. So I wanted to have them, oriented right and then in the right order as well. So I just kind of set up this breadboard to make sure that I had it all right. And then I took them off the breadboard one by one, marked the links of the leads, and began to solder those on. So this is just kind of showing how all that went. So I kind of took some time to show you one, and then after that I just soldered on the rest. Alright, so that ended up looking pretty good. I think I kind of gave him a little bit of a hunchback there. I got one LED maybe a little higher than I wanted, but I think it still looks pretty good overall. Next was the switch that turns the whole thing on and off, and so I took some time to show it, and then I thought I was recording soldering it on, but apparently I didn't, so there you go. Next comes the resistors. There are two of them, so I soldered the first one on. And notice here I'm kind of bending the wire a little bit so that it reaches down to the board. Next is the little MOSFET, and I want to make sure I put the flat side down towards the circuit board. And then once I got the orientation right and lined up with the pads, I had to bend the leads a little bit to get them to fit where the pads are. And then after that, it was just a matter of soldering those on. Here I used a little clamp to kind of help me hold the part in place. A little spring clamp. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now it's time to just solder it up. Alright, looks good. So now from here, it's time to put on the legs. Here I took some time, not so much getting the 4 sets of legs soldered on. That went on pretty straightforward, but from there I then took the time to kind of get him bent, looking right. We wanted him to sit on all 4 feet and have a nice stance. So. And once I got the first leg soldered on, I just kind of quickly showed the other 3. Alright, now that I've got all 4 legs soldered on, as I said, I was going to take a little bit of time to kind of get them all adjusted and kind of have a nice stance to the get-go there. There we go. Looks like it's sitting pretty good now. All right. Get the vise back out, and next up is the eye. This is made out of a photo sensor that will turn the LEDs on and off, and they go in the bottom holes there. And again, we want to make sure we get this oriented right, so kind of had to pay close attention to how it was supposed to go in the first place, and then it doesn't go through that side, it gets mounted from the other side. So I wanted to make sure I kept everything all lined up correctly, and then put a 90-degree bend in the leads so that the eye faces forward. No, I guess that wasn't necessarily a requirement, being a lizard, huh? So here again, I took some time getting the leads shaped the way they needed to be. We wanted the eye to be set off a little bit of a distance, and then, you know, not too terribly much, but not right on the surface either. And then we needed to bend the leads again so that it could follow along the pad there. You'll see here in just a second. And there you can see I've got the leads bent along so that they can be soldered onto the pad. Again, using the spring clamp to kind of hold things in place helps a lot. And then trim off the excess there. A lot of times I try to trim all that off before I solder it, but this time I was trying to hold so much stuff that it was just easier to trim the leads off afterwards. And then the way this was designed, there was just kind of a coil of wire, is kind of a whimsical thing to put around the light sensor. And so I bent a scrap lead that I had, and honestly I really had no idea how long this lead was supposed to be. I just got one that was nice and long I had laying around in a scrap bin, and figured if I needed to I could cut it a little shorter, but it seemed like it ought to be long enough, so I soldered that on there. It's not connected to anything, it's not electrically part of anything, so from here it was just a matter of taking some pliers and just patiently wrapping it around that light sensor there. Just kind of making small tweaks here and there, and stopping and looking at it and adjusting and making some more tweaks. And I just kind of kept going around. I didn't have any really set notions about how this was going to end up. I just kept kind of going, and it turns out I could use all of the lead just as it was, and it seemed to work out pretty good and turned out looking pretty nice. So didn't need it to be exactly perfect. Like I said, this is kind of a whimsical, cartoony type character, and I think it fits with a lot of the silk screening and whatnot. So there you can see the whole thing done up with his crazy eye there. And then last but not least, he needs a tongue. So I came up with kind of a heavy piece of copper wire that I had from like a house electrical wire, something that I'd stripped all the sheathing off of, and decided that would look pretty good. and just solder it in there, and then add a little bit of a curve to it. So there's my little piece of wire that I cut. And I'm really glad I decided to put this bend in there first, because it turns out that was pretty big for the pad that it was being soldered to. So I don't think I would have been able to put that bend in that wire with it soldered to the pad. I probably would have ended up ripping the pad clean off of the circuit board there. So I'm glad I decided to go ahead and do that. But once I got that little curve put in there, I loaded it back up on the vise and tinned the end of the wire, and spent some time getting that copper all good and hot, and then was able to get everything all melted at once, and it attached pretty good. But again, I don't think I could have put that bend in there afterwards. So there you go. That's all the parts soldered on, and this is what it looks like. Thought it turned out pretty good. Everything looks nice. I think the solder joints looked fairly clean and decent. And turn it on there, and you can see, yep, all my LEDs light up and all the colors are in the right order there. Put a little bit of shade on there so you can get a better shot of it. And I thought it turned out pretty cool. It was a lot of fun to put together, and hoped you enjoyed the show.